For 30 years, the mayor of Jersey City, New Jersey, earned a salary that never exceeded $8,500 a year. When he died, a former attorney general of the state extracted a private admission from him. He was worth $8 million. The lawyer who got that number later said the real amount was probably 10 times higher. The man's name was Frank Hague. He was born in a tenement, expelled from school before finishing 6th grade, and he could barely read more than newspaper headlines. By the time he was done, he controlled every judge, every cop, every city job, and every vote in Hudson County. He chose governors. He chose senators. He chose who got to speak in public and who got thrown on a ferry back to New York. He built the third largest hospital in the world and left behind a city with the highest tax rate in the nation. And when his 700-pound hammered copper casket was carried out of the funeral home in Jersey City, only 4 men in the crowd bothered to remove their hats. This is the story of how he did it. Start with the place. Jersey City in the 1880s was one of the most important transportation nodes in America. 3 passenger railroad terminals lined the Hudson River waterfront: Pavonia Terminal, Exchange Place, Communipaw. And roughly 2/3 of every immigrant processed at Ellis Island entered the United States by stepping off a ferry at Communipaw and onto a train platform in Jersey City. The railroads didn't just pass through, they owned the place. Their tracks carved the city's geography, their freight yards filled in entire coves along the waterfront, and their tunnels bored through Bergen Hill. About 30% of the taxable land in Jersey City belonged to railroad companies. But here was the trick. The state board that assessed railroad property kept the valuations low, which meant the railroads paid minimal property taxes, while the working people of Jersey City, the immigrants from Ireland, Germany, Poland, Italy, carried the burden. That imbalance would become the lever that Frank Hague used to seize power. Now look at one neighborhood, the Horseshoe. It was the 2nd Ward, and it got its name from the shape of the railroad loop that curved through it, bending the streets into a rough crescent of tenement houses, slum courtyards, and corner saloons. In the 1870s, the Republican-controlled state legislature had gerrymandered this district to concentrate as many Catholic, Democratic-leaning immigrants as possible into a single ward, isolating their votes. It was an act of political containment. The men who drew those lines could not have imagined that a generation later, the Horseshoe would produce the most powerful political boss in American history, and that everything they tried to contain would swallow the entire state. Frank Hague was born on January 17, 1876, in a tenement on Cork Row in the Horseshoe, a building locals called the Ark, because after a rainstorm it sat surrounded by stagnant water. His parents, John and Margaret Hague, were immigrants from County Cavan, Ireland. John Hague was a blacksmith for the Erie Railroad, then a bank guard, a quiet man who left almost no mark on the record. Margaret Hague was another matter. One neighbor would later call her a bitch on wheels. She ruled the household with fierce Catholic discipline and instilled in her son 2 things that never left him: an unshakable Puritanism and an appetite for control. Frank Hague never drank a drop of alcohol in his life. He never smoked. There was never a whisper of infidelity. And yet he would build one of the most corrupt political machines the country has ever seen. Those 2 facts are not a contradiction. They are the key to the whole story. School was a disaster. Hague was expelled at 13 for poor attendance and bad behavior, and that was the end of his formal education. He worked briefly as a blacksmith's apprentice at the Erie Roundhouse, but he didn't last. What he found instead was the boxing gym. He managed a lightweight named Joe Craig, who won enough fights that Hague could afford a few good suits, and in the Horseshoe, looking prosperous was half the battle. In 1896, a tavern owner named Ned Kenny was feuding with a rival saloon keeper over who would control the Democratic ticket in the 2nd Ward. Kenny needed a candidate for constable. He looked at the 20-year-old Hague, saw the sharp suits and the confident walk, handed him $75, and told him to use your head. Hague won by a margin of 3-1. Remember the name Ned Kenny. It will come back 30 years later to end everything. The constable job was nothing, a few dollars a week, minor enforcement duties. But it brought Hague to the attention of Bob Davis, the Democratic boss of Hudson County, who needed men who could get out the vote in tough neighborhoods. Hague had a gift for this. He could knock on doors, charm mothers, promise favors, and count heads with mechanical precision. Davis rewarded him with a deputy sheriff appointment at $25 a week. Hague rose through the ward structure, delivering his precinct reliably, while the rest of Jersey City swung to the Republicans under reform Mayor Mark Fagan. Then came a scandal that, in most careers, would have been fatal. In 1904, Hague and another deputy sheriff provided a false alibi under oath for a friend named Red Dugan, who had been passing fraudulent checks in Boston. When Dugan confessed, the Boston court wanted to indict Hague for perjury, but couldn't extradite him. The press covered it. It didn't matter. In the Horseshoe, helping a friend, especially at the request of that friend's mother, was not a scandal. It was a virtue. Hague was re-elected constable and kept rising. He broke with Boss Davis in 1906 over a patronage dispute and backed a reform candidate, H. Otto Whitpen, for mayor. When Whitpen won in 1907, he appointed Hague city custodian. It was in Whitpen's office that Hague met two men who would shape his career. A. Harry Moore, a Presbyterian Sunday school teacher who would serve 3 terms as governor of New Jersey entirely under Hague's control, and John Milton, a lawyer who would advise Hague for decades. After Davis died in 1911, Hague turned on Whitpen himself, accusing him of bossism, a charge so audacious it tells you everything about Hague's instinct for the jugular. In 1911, Hague won election as Street and Water Commissioner, and here he revealed the template he would use for the rest of his career. He walked into the department and announced sweeping reforms. He slashed the budget from $180,000 a year to $110,000. He fired half the staff. The newspapers loved it. Hague the reformer, Hague the cost cutter. Then, quietly, after the headlines faded, he hired back more people than he had fired, his own people, loyal to him and him alone. This was the mechanism. Reform as a public performance, patronage as the private reality. He would run this play over and over for the next 3 decades, and it would work every time. In 1916, Hague won the post of Commissioner of Public Safety, giving him control of the police and fire departments. He fired hundreds of corrupt officers in mass trials, as many as 125 in a single day, and replaced them with young men from the Horseshoe. From among these new recruits, he assembled an elite squad of plainclothes officers who came to be known as the Zeppelins, because their job was to hover above everything and report directly back to Hague. The Zeppelins monitored the entire police force. They monitored the saloons. They monitored anyone Hague wanted monitored. No cop in the city dared accept petty graft, because the Zeppelins would know. Instead, the graft flowed upward in an orderly fashion to one man. In 1917, Hague ran for mayor. He maneuvered Whitpen out of the race, allied with Moore on a commission slate, and in a packed, howling session in the City Hall council chamber, the new commissioners chose Hague as mayor. He had finished second in total votes. Moore actually got more. But the commission ignored the tradition of naming the top vote-getter and unanimously gave the job to Hague. More than 30 years would pass before another man stood in that chamber to receive similar acclaim. The women's vote was a new frontier. The 19th Amendment had passed in 1920, and Hague, faster than almost any boss in the country, moved to capture it. He added ladies' auxiliaries to every ward club and anointed a community volunteer named Mary T. Norton as his model female candidate. Norton became the first woman on the Hudson County Board of Freeholders, then went to Congress, where she served 13 consecutive terms. She was genuinely talented, but she existed in Hague's world because Hague had decided she would exist there. Hague understood something that most bosses of his era did not. Most political machines operated in partnership with big business. The corporations looked the other way on graft. The machine looked the other way on labor abuses, and everyone got rich together. Hague went the opposite direction. He attacked the corporations, specifically the railroads and utilities that owned so much of Jersey City's land. In 1917 and 1918, he dramatically increased tax assessments on Standard Oil from $1.5 million to $14 million, on the Public Service Corporation from $3 million to $30 million, and on the railroads from $67 million to $160 million. The State Tax Board, controlled by Republican appointees, canceled every increase. Hague needed his own governor. He found Edward I. Edwards, president of the First National Bank of Jersey City, and ran him for governor in 1919 on the issue of prohibition. Edwards promised to make New Jersey wetter than the Atlantic Ocean. With 20 of 21 counties reporting, the Republican was ahead by 21,000 votes. Then Hudson County came in. Hague's machine delivered a 36,000-vote margin for Edwards, burying the rest of the state. One of Edwards's first acts was to fire the entire state tax board. The new board approved Hague's assessments on the railroads and utilities. The money poured in. Hague called Hudson County the Gibraltar of democracy. This was the formula. Control the votes in Hudson County. Use that block to elect the governor. Use the governor to appoint judges, prosecutors, tax officials, and the dozens of commissioners who ran New Jersey's sprawling state bureaucracy, more than 80 different boards and commissions, plus judgeships across 14 court systems. Between 1919 and 1940, Democrats won 6 of 9 gubernatorial races, and almost every victory was attributable to the Hudson County landslide. 3 of those governors, Edwards, George Silzer, and the reliable A. Harry Moore, owed their careers entirely to Hague, and every one of them let Hague fill the state apparatus with loyal men. The most breathtaking appointment came in 1939, when Governor Moore placed Hague's 34-year-old son, Frank Hague, Jr., on the Court of Errors and Appeals, New Jersey's highest judicial body, at a salary of $9,000 a year. Frank Jr. was a likable young man who had failed to graduate from 2 law schools, yet had somehow passed the New Jersey bar exam on his first try. Bar associations across the state were apoplectic. Moore's only comment was, "I know this appointment will make his dad happy." Hague also understood that in a city where 75% of the churchgoers were Catholic, the church was either an ally or a threat. He chose to make it an ally by suffocating it with generosity. After snowstorms, city employees cleared the sidewalks of Catholic schools without anyone raising the question of church-state separation. The County Mechanics Bureau had 3 chaplains, 1 Catholic, 1 Protestant, 1 Jewish, paid from public funds. Hudson County legislators even got a law passed allowing police and fire precincts to hire their own chaplains. Protestant clergy occasionally criticized Hague in the 1920s, but his anti-communist crusade in the 1930s brought the full weight of Catholic moral authority to his side. Political action by priests was quietly discouraged. The church divided along parish lines as Hague preferred. Dozens of small loyalties, never one large institution that could challenge him. Now consider the finances of the machine itself. Every office holder in Hudson County, every clerk, every cop, every firefighter, every Parks Department worker was required to contribute 3% of his salary to the organization. Half of every raise went to the machine. Half the salary for any nominal work on a state board or commission went to the machine. No accounting was ever made of this river of cash, which swelled to at least $500,000 a year and probably exceeded $1 million. Then there were the contractors who kicked back 10% of every city contract. Then there were the real estate deals in which dummy corporations, headed by shadowy figures in New York, bought land just before Jersey City condemned it and resold it at enormous prices. Then there were the numbers rackets and the horse gambling operations. Jersey City became known as the Horse Bourse, whose operators paid protection money to Hague's organization. Visitors who wanted to discuss arrangements with the mayor found a special desk in his office. You placed your cash in the drawer on your side, and it came out on Hague's side. On a salary of $8,500, Frank Hague lived in a 14-room duplex on the 9th and 10th floors of 2600 Kennedy Boulevard, the finest apartment building in Jersey City. From the top floor windows, he could see across the Hudson River to Manhattan, south to Bayonne, and west to Newark Bay. His 9th floor library was paneled in mahogany. He owned a summer mansion in Deal, New Jersey, valued at $125,000, and a winter home on Biscayne Bay in Miami worth $100,000. He kept a rented suite at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. He took annual vacations to Paris with his wife. He ordered his shirts custom-made and his silk underwear from A. Salka and Company. He placed $1,000 bills at the racetrack. He traveled in a bulletproof automobile flanked by bodyguards. What did the people of Jersey City get in return? This is where the story becomes something more complicated than simple corruption. They got clean streets. They got one of the lowest crime rates of any major city in America. They got the Jersey City Medical Center. Hague's mother, Margaret, had died in 1921 after years of poor health, unable to afford adequate medical care. That year, Hague began planning a medical complex that would provide free health care to every resident of Jersey City. Over the next 2 decades, working with architect John T. Rowland and later Christian H. Ziegler, he built what became the 3rd largest healthcare facility in the world, 10 Art Deco buildings ranging from 15 to 23 stories, totaling 2 million square feet, rising from Bergen Hill like a separate city. The buildings featured terrazzo floors, marble lobbies, glass and brass railings, terracotta engravings of Egyptian and Greek motifs. The total published cost of land and construction was $21.9 million, with an additional $5 million for other properties and staff. The formal dedication came on October 2, 1936, when President Franklin Roosevelt emerged from the Lincoln Tunnel to the cheers of an estimated 200,000 people lining the streets. The first building completed had been the Margaret Hague Maternity Hospital, which opened on October 12, 1931. Designed by Christian Ziegler, this 10-story Art Deco tower held rooms for 400 mothers and their babies. There was a stainless steel chandelier in the delivery room. There was a movie theater on the top floor. There were extended visiting hours for working fathers and daycare for the children of hospitalized mothers. The interior furnishings were from Gray's, a local furniture store on Newark Avenue. In 1923, infant mortality in Hudson County had peaked at 212 deaths per 1,000 births. The Margaret Hague Maternity Hospital drove that number down dramatically, and over the decades, more than 350,000 babies were born within its walls. Among them, Martha Stewart, Governor James McGreevey, and 2 of Frank Sinatra's children. Frank Hague named the hospital for his mother. He also donated a $50,000 marble altar to St. Eden's Roman Catholic Church in her memory. The woman who had raised him with such ferocity was the only person in the world he seemed to genuinely revere. Then came Roosevelt Stadium. In the depths of the Great Depression, Hague secured $1.5 million in Federal Works Progress Administration funds to build a 24,000-seat ballpark at Droyers Point on the site of a small municipal airport. Christian Ziegler designed it in Art Deco style to match the medical center, using marble sourced from Pennsylvania and Tennessee. On December 10, 1935, nearly 2,000 people watched Hague turn the first shovel of earth. The project provided 2,400 construction jobs. Hague named it Roosevelt Stadium in gratitude to the president, and when the Jersey City Giants of the International League played their first game there in 1937, an overflow crowd of over 31,000 showed up, a minor league record. And it was at Roosevelt Stadium on April 18, 1946, that something happened which transcended anything Frank Hague ever intended. The Montreal Royals came to Jersey City for the season opener, and their second baseman was a 27-year-old man named Jackie Robinson. Hague declared the day a half-day school holiday and threw out the first pitch. A sold-out crowd of 51,872 watched Robinson break professional baseball's color barrier. He went 4 for 5 with a 3-run home run, scored 4 runs, drove in 3, and stole 2 bases in a 14-1 rout. After the game, Robinson was mobbed by fans, black and white, who followed him through the dugout tunnel and into the locker room. Robinson later wrote that the Jersey City fans gave him a fine ovation. It happened in a stadium built by a political boss with WPA money, in a city where a single man decided who could speak and who could not. The alliance with Franklin Roosevelt was the apex of Hague's power, and it had begun with a gamble. In 1932, Hague had backed Al Smith for the Democratic presidential nomination out of loyalty. He'd supported Smith since 1924. When Smith lost the convention to Roosevelt, Hague had to pivot fast. He offered to stage Roosevelt's first general election campaign rally at Seagirt, the summer mansion of New Jersey governors. Roosevelt was skeptical. Then, on August 27, 1932, 120,000 supporters arrived at Seagirt, transported from Hudson and Essex counties on 100 chartered trains and 50 buses. Roosevelt was astonished. He carried New Jersey by only 2 points that November. He would have lost the state without Hudson County, and he never forgot the debt. Roosevelt repaid it by routing federal patronage in New Jersey through Hague, not through the governor. Between 1936 and 1943, New Jersey received over $400 million in WPA funds, and Hague controlled where the money went and who got the jobs. The New Deal's Department of Justice never investigated Republican complaints about Hague's machine. When New Jersey's Republican Attorney General Walter Van Riper opened investigations into Hague's operations, a federal grand jury promptly indicted Van Riper himself. He was acquitted, but the message was clear. According to one historian, Roosevelt played a direct role in getting those charges brought. The president needed Hague, and Hague needed the president, and between them, they constructed a mutual protection arrangement that lasted until Roosevelt died in 1945. But there was a line, and in 1937, Hague crossed it in a way that would pursue him to the Supreme Court. The Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO, was a new and more radical labor union that sought to organize unskilled workers. Hague despised it. He wanted to attract industry to Jersey City by promising businesses a docile, non-union workforce, and he considered the CIO communistic. When CIO organizers arrived in the city, Hague banned them. His police destroyed their leaflets, broke up their marches, arrested their members, and physically escorted them to the Hudson River Ferry, deporting them to New York. In January 1938, Hague stood before the Jersey City Chamber of Commerce and said, "We hear about constitutional rights, free speech, and the free press. Every time I hear those words, I say to myself, that man is a Red. That man is a communist. You never heard a real American talk in that manner." The CIO kept coming. Norman Thomas, the Socialist Party's presidential candidate, tried to hold a rally at Journal Square. Hague had him run out of town. The Zeppelins patrolled the ferry arrivals, deporting anyone who wore a CIO badge. No private hall in the city would rent to the union. The owners knew what would happen if they did. The American Civil Liberties Union joined the fight, and the case went to federal court. In 1939, the Supreme Court ruled in Hague versus CIO that streets and parks were public forums protected by the First Amendment, and that Hague had violated the constitutional rights of the organizers. It was the first time in American history that the court had defined public spaces as constitutionally protected venues for free expression. The case remains a landmark in First Amendment law. Frank Hague, the man who couldn't finish 6th grade, inadvertently created one of the foundational legal doctrines of American civil liberties. The irony didn't soften his methods. Hague's taste for personal violence was not metaphorical. He reportedly knocked one of his own commissioners, Michael Fagan, unconscious on the mayoral office carpet in 1929. Once, during one of his long walks around the city, always trailed by bodyguards at a discreet distance, Hague called an ambulance just to test the response time. It took 15 minutes. He began berating the young intern who arrived. "It took me a while to wake up," the intern said. Hague punched him into the gutter. In 1921, a group of Princeton University political science students had volunteered to observe the polling places in Jersey City to ensure an honest election. Within an hour of the polls opening, 5 of them were in the hospital. Hague's explanation? Animal spirits, that's all. "I guess my boys couldn't resist the temptation to have a little fun." By the late 1930s, 20 years into his reign, the cost of Hague's machine was becoming visible. Taxes in Jersey City had increased threefold. Property assessments had doubled. The city's bonded debt had grown by 500%. Jersey City was the highest taxed municipality in the United States and carried the biggest bonded debt of any large city in the country. The cost per taxpayer for Jersey City's government was more than 4 times that of Kansas City or New Orleans, both of which were run by their own political bosses and had populations roughly 100,000 larger. Tax assessors punished property holders who spoke out against Hague. Factories began to leave. Businesses that might have come to Jersey City looked at the tax rate and went elsewhere. The population, which had peaked at 316,000 in 1930, began to decline. But the machine kept running because the machine fed on itself. The public payroll was bloated with loyalists, and every one of them owed his job to the organization and paid his 3%. The Depression actually helped Hague, because in a world without Social Security or unemployment insurance, the machine was the only safety net. If you lost your job, you went to your ward leader. If your family needed food, Hague's people brought it to your door. If your child was sick, the medical center treated them for free. The price was your vote, your loyalty, and your silence. And during the Depression, that price looked reasonable. The first serious challenge came not from the voters, but from a governor. Charles Edison, the son of Thomas Edison, won the governorship in 1940, and unlike Hague's previous governors, Edison had not been hand-picked for the role. Roosevelt had asked Hague to support Edison as a favor, and Hague reluctantly agreed. Edison promptly began asserting his independence, reducing patronage for Hudson County, and pushing to modernize New Jersey's antique 1844 Constitution. Hague fought back by attacking Edison over railroad tax forgiveness. The state's railroads owed some $81 million in back taxes, and almost half of that money belonged to Jersey City. Hague hammered Edison as a tool of the corporate interests, which was as comfortable as an old shoe for a man who had been running that play since 1917. Edison left office without having broken Hague's power. The problem was that Edison simply wasn't Woodrow Wilson, and Hague's operation was far larger and far more entrenched than any machine Wilson had ever faced. But by the mid-1940s, the forces undermining Hague were structural, not political. The Irish, who had been his base since the beginning, were increasingly a minority in Jersey City as Italian, Polish, and other ethnic communities grew. The New Deal and its successors had created a governmental safety net, Social Security, unemployment insurance, that reduced people's dependence on the machine. Hague preferred to give major patronage positions to fellow Irish, and this caused resentment in other communities. He was also increasingly not there. He spent months at a time at his estate in Deal, at his mansion in Florida, at the Plaza in New York. His phone bills for long-distance calls from Florida to Jersey City were staggering. On June 4, 1947, Hague announced his resignation. He was 72 years old. A grand ceremony was staged at Dickinson High School, where dozens of politicians he had elevated to power appeared on the platform to praise his accomplishments. Then Hague rose and made clear that he was not resigning as chairman of the Democratic Party in the state and county. The resignation was what historian Thomas Fleming called a great smokescreen. Hague installed his nephew, Frank Hague Eggers, as his successor, the Commissioner of Parks and Public Works, a man understood by everyone to be taking orders from his uncle. Just to make sure he retained total control, Hague was willing to risk the fury that such open nepotism was certain to provoke. He didn't have to wonder long about where that fury would come from. John V. Kenney was the leader of the Second Ward, the Horseshoe. He was known as the Little Guy. He had been one of Hague's own lieutenants, part of an inner circle known as the 12 Apostles. He had expected to inherit the machine. But the appointment of Eggers forced Kenney's hand. If he wanted the crown, it was now or never. Quietly, Kenney began making secret trips to Newark to confer with Republican leaders. The only way to beat Hague was a fusion ticket, backed by Republican money. Hague's espionage system detected Kenney's betrayal almost immediately, but Kenney was driven into a corner and decided to fight. And here is where Ned Kenney's $75 comes back. John V. Kenney was Ned Kenney's son, the same Ned Kenney who had handed a 20-year-old Frank Hague his first campaign stake in 1896. The son of the man who launched Hague's career was the man who ended it. Kenney gathered disgruntled ward leaders and young veterans returning from the war and assembled a fusion ticket he called the Freedom Party. They published a newspaper that mocked a royal family, printed photostats of Hague's bills at A. Sulca's, $75 for a shirt, $25 for silk underwear, and leaked his astronomical long-distance phone bills from Florida. The campaign also bribed voters and, crucially, paid more per bribe, $15 against the machine's going rate of $5. On May 10, 1949, Kenney defeated Eggers by 22,000 votes, carrying all 4 wards, including, to everyone's astonishment, the Second Ward, the Horseshoe, where Hague had started his career 53 years earlier. Hague was finished. He tried to reassert control through the 1949 governor's race, backing a strong candidate named Elmer Ween. But Kenney made a deal to deliver Jersey City to the Republicans. For the first time since 1920, a Republican carried Jersey City in a statewide election. Hague spent his final years in exile, dividing his time between a luxurious apartment at 480 Park Avenue in Manhattan and the mansion on Biscayne Bay, afraid to set foot in New Jersey for fear of subpoenas. In 1952, the Democratic National Committee replaced him as vice chairman and as committeeman from New Jersey, the last vestige of his formal power. He died on New Year's Day, 1956, at 81 in his Park Avenue apartment. His body was taken to Jersey City one final time. The casket, 700 pounds of hammered copper, was carried from Quinn's funeral home on Academy Street. A solemn voice called out to the crowd on the sidewalk, "Hats, men." Of the 100 standing there, 4 men lifted their hats. One woman held an American flag and a sign that read, "God have mercy on his sinful, greedy soul." A requiem mass was said at St. Aidan's Church, where the $50,000 marble altar Hague had donated still stood. He was buried in a large mausoleum at Holy Name Cemetery in Jersey City, and if you visit today, it is there, impressive and solitary. And what did he leave behind? This was what Time magazine cataloged in 1949. A city fairly free of crime and vice, a first-class medical center and maternity hospital, one of the highest tax rates in the nation, rigged assessments, discouraged businesses, factories deserted by fleeing industry, a city turned into a patchwork of slums by political graft. From 1950 to 1980, Jersey City lost 75,000 residents. The medical center, which was never used at full capacity, even in its prime, became a crushing financial burden. It was simply larger than what was needed. On May 16, 2004, the Jersey City Medical Center closed its doors at the old complex for the last time and moved to a new, smaller facility on Grand Street. As for John V. Kenney, the man who defeated Hague, he ran his own machine for the next 2 decades. It grew as corrupt as Hague's, though nowhere near as efficient in providing services. In 1971, Kenny was indicted on charges of conspiracy and extortion in a multi-million-dollar kickback scheme. He pleaded guilty to federal tax evasion. The Horseshoe had produced two bosses, and the second one ended up the same way as the first, only in handcuffs. Today, Hague's Art Deco towers on Bergen Hill have been converted into something he never could have imagined. A development company renovated the entire 2 million square foot complex into 1,500 luxury apartments, now marketed as the Beacon. The Margaret Hague Maternity Hospital, where 350,000 babies were born, where a stainless steel chandelier hung over the delivery room, is called the Hague. 241 rental apartments. Its restoration is one of the largest adaptive reuse projects in the history of the United States. Murdoch Hall, the nurse's residence with the mahogany office Hague built for himself, was used as a filming location for the Robert Redford movie Quiz Show because its Art Deco interiors looked enough like Rockefeller Center to pass for Midtown Manhattan. Roosevelt Stadium was demolished in 1985. A housing development sits on the site. There is no monument to Jackie Robinson's debut there, though one has been discussed for years. The Horseshoe itself is gone in all but memory, swallowed by the construction of the Holland Tunnel approach, which carved through the old Second Ward and erased the streets where Frank Hague was born. The Ark, the tenement on Cork Row surrounded by stagnant water, has been gone for generations. But the railroad loop that gave the neighborhood its name, the curve of track that bent the district into a shape that concentrated all those Irish and Catholic votes into one ward, the gerrymander that was supposed to neutralize them, that decision, made by Republican legislators in 1871, is the decision that made everything else possible. They drew a line on a map to silence a community, and from behind that line, Frank Hague rose and swallowed the state. He was buried a few miles from where he was born. His mausoleum at Holy Name Cemetery is solid and imposing, built to last. The apartment at 2600 Kennedy Boulevard still stands. From its upper floors, you can still see Manhattan. Hague could always see Manhattan. He just never left Jersey City. Not really. Not until the city was finally done with him and he had to go. A man with a sixth-grade education who said, "I am the law," and meant it. Who built marble hospitals with money skimmed from the paychecks of clerks. Who delivered a president 120,000 cheering supporters on 100 chartered trains, and then expected and received protection from prosecution in return. A man feared more than he was hated, who died alone in a borrowed city, whose casket passed through a crowd that would not remove its hats. The four men who did lift theirs, nobody recorded their names.